Well, wading into the latest YouTube wars, Jordan Chariton tweeted, "The corporate Dem establishment and its media allies are loving the current divide and conquer / mass cancellation / never-ending war among indie media." He explains that he's seen this behavior on the progressive left before, referencing Bernie Sanders' endorsement of Hillary Clinton in 2016, saying rightfully disappointed and frustrated progressives began turning on Bernie and diving headfirst into a political nihilist mentality that believes any politician that takes a direction or makes a policy you don't agree with is a sellout. This is also now happening with YouTube hosts.
Joining us now to discuss is journalist and head of Status Coup, Jordan Chariton. Jordan, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
And Jordan, I thought your historical perspective was interesting here because you've seen this on the ground. You covered the rise of the Bernie Sanders movement 2015 and 2016, and then you watched as things began to unwind. After he lost that primary, and particularly then after he endorsed Hillary Clinton, because you had a number of people who felt betrayed by that and didn't understand, because they hadn't been following Bernie Sanders' career for so long, that of course this was exactly how this was going to unfold. I think some of the tensions on the left were suppressed in 2017 thanks to Trump. In 2018, thanks to kind of the rise of the squad, where people had something to believe in again. And then 2019, the second Bernie Sanders campaign kicks off, so people again have something to organize around. That's going well right up until South Carolina and Super Tuesday. All of a sudden, overnight, they're going from within a centimeter of the ring to now political oblivion, and the wheels just seem to come off the conversation from there. Did you see it immediately in the aftermath of this second Sanders campaign, and a gradual process, or do you think that something more recent has actually triggered a deeper implosion?
Yeah, I kind of think about it kind of juxtaposing Trump supporters and Bernie supporters, not as far as ideology, because obviously that's wildly different, but Trump supporters were kind of the living victims of NAFTA, the offshoring of jobs, deindustrialization, and that left them, rightfully angry at the establishment, cynical at the establishment, and kind of susceptible to a phony populist and his message. I think similar things are happening with progressives because basically a large part of Bernie Sanders' movement were people that were devastated by the 08-09 financial crash, whether it be, not being able to get jobs after that, whether it be, if they got jobs, having to work 2 or 3 jobs, obviously student loan debt, rising. So I think there's similarities, as well as older progressives that latched on to Bernie's message, kind of got hooked in by the word revolution, but see their healthcare costs going up. A lot of them got foreclosed on. So I think that in both pools, whether it were the Trump supporters in 2016 and Bernie supporters that have fallen out of love or think Bernie's become a fraud or a sellout, same thing for the squad, it's this kind of understandable anger, understandable frustration that has evolved into an all or nothing black or white politics, that if you're not breathing 100% what we want, if you're not, with us 1,000% of the way, if you're not, doing the same tactics and strategies we want you to do, then you're giving cover for the Democratic Party or you're a fraud. And I think that's not only a not productive mentality, but kind of dangerous to actually achieving anything.
This reminds me so much of actually what happened on the right in the Tea Party years, when it was all of this infighting, and then the media sort of latched onto it, because two things are true. Infighting in a political movement is inevitable and necessary to some degree. And the second thing is that the establishment media is going to both amplify and exacerbate that infighting, because their ideology at the end of the day is money and power.
What were the fissures that were really breaking the Tea Party apart?
Well, it's super similar. That's what I was actually just going to ask Jordan, is because how do you purge the necessary, how do you undertake the necessary work of purging grift because whenever there is populist uprisings in a political movement, then people will grift on it.
All kinds of different Tea Party entities selling this and that.
100%. And then you have people that are really actually establishment ideologues sort of latching on to populist mentality or, populist mentality or the ideology of whatever the movement is to capitalize on it, to gain their political power, to make money, whatever it is, get media coverage. So it happens all the time. The question is, for progressives right now, how do you litigate these things in the YouTube environment? Because it seems particularly ill-suited to have these conversations because so much of YouTube is about beefing. Ryan and I were talking about this the other day. It's like a huge currency in YouTube is just like beefing with other YouTubers. And when you're trying to actually have a solid and efficient and useful political movement that is being litigated in the YouTube space, which can be really helpful for a lot of reasons, how do you go about that in that kind of difficult environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think multiple things can be true. There's nothing wrong with criticizing politicians on YouTube. There's nothing wrong with criticizing YouTube hosts. But at a certain point, do you want to win? Do you want to achieve policy goals? Or do you want to play a game of like Survivor, who's the last real progressive standing? Because that's kind of what we're playing right now, right? I don't think my opinion on, for example, the Young Turks is that much of a secret, but people could just not watch instead of doing, 55 videos a day at multiple channels on the Young Turks. If people have an issue with Ryan Grimm, they don't need to read him. But while all of this infighting going on, and again, some of it is valid, some journalists were smeared, what have you. I mean, Blackstone's buying up the country, as well as the Koch brothers. Homelessness is exploding. The eviction crisis is already here, which we spoke about last time. Obviously, there's black men still being assassinated by police. I mean, the list goes on and on. The pipelines going through on Native American reservation, but very little of that's being talked about in YouTube spaces, and there's very little actual organizing going on any of those issues. For example, I think forced to vote was a tipping point. And that kind of escalated a lot of this. Who's the frauds? Who's a sellout? This and that. But there was very actual constructive, in my view, organizing to pressure the squad. Aside from like calling them all Lucifer, there was very actual organizing to pressure them, or I think constructively shame them. I mean, they're all creatures of the internet for the most part, and I think they can be pressured, and I think they can be shamed. But if we're all going to spend the rest of the decade on, attacking this channel or this host or this one's canceled or this or that, well, I think the establishment media as well as the Democratic Party loves that because then there's very little attention on what they're doing.
And now we turn to known fraud, Ryan Grimm.
Right. And like you said, the establishment is quite happy with that because, like you said, they're busy buying up homes across the country. Big oil is spreading lies about what their actual position is on climate change. And one particular big oil company is even privately prosecuting an attorney who challenged them in court. And Jordan, one reason we wanted to have you on is because so much of your reporting does not delve into the beef versus the beef world and actually goes onto the ground to talk about what's really happening. One of the stories you did recently was about the attorney that Chevron is taking on, Stephen Donziger. Let's play a clip of that.
On Stephen Donziger, please let's remember the people of Ecuador. I was part of an international legal team that won a $9.5 billion judgment against Chevron on behalf of indigenous peoples and farmer communities who started with no money. Texaco and Chevron thought they couldn't do this kind of thing. They counted on people not being able to fight back. This was an American company that went down to the Amazon and destroyed the lands of the indigenous peoples, including the compatriots of Lino, the Sequoia, the Siona, the Quichua, the Waorani, the Kofan. Those are the 5 indigenous peoples in this region where Texaco played God.
That's Stephen Donziger, who remains on house arrest as a result of his successful civil suit on behalf of those Ecuadorians against the company of Chevron. Jordan, tell people what's the latest on this case.
Yeah, I mean, today's day 702, so almost 2 years he's been under house arrest. We're expecting some type of verdict in the case. He's been under house arrest for a misdemeanor contempt charge for the crime of a lawyer not handing over his computers and cell phones to hand over attorney-client privileged documents. I mean, the whole thing, I mean, I've seen a lot of corruption, but I've never heard of, I mean, people need to understand a federal prosecutor declined to prosecute Stephen Donziger because there is no case. I mean, other lawyers on the case won a settlement against Chevron, and instead of just paying up, which, you know, a lot of fossil fuel companies just pay their settlements because it's kind of in their balance sheet. It's the price of doing business. Yeah. They ended up basically going on this holy crusade against Donziger, really less about him, but just to chill any other future Stephen Donzigers. They're doing the same things to, you know, environmental protests. We've seen laws going on state to state trying to criminalize, environmental protests against pipelines, which a lot of those same politicians are funded by the fossil fuel companies. And the important thing is, you know, I know the resistance, kind of goes back to sleep when it's a Democrat in office, but Democrats and Biden very aggressively went after Trump for abuses on the rule of law, the Department of Justice, what have you. But President Biden could step in right now and just shut this whole thing down, as can, you know, I know the squad and some of those members issued a statement, but they could be, you know, really bringing more attention to this, because this is a human rights lawyer who basically fought for people who have no one else to fight for them in other countries. And by the way, what happened in Ecuador with Chevron dumping its toxic waste is happening in America too. I mean, there's plenty of environmental contamination in America due to not just fossil fuel companies, but mining and what have you. So if this continues to happen with Stephen Donziger, where he goes to jail essentially for, you know, fighting a fossil fuel company and winning, it's a slippery slope, and it's not too far away from happening to lawyers and environmental activists and environmental groups that successfully go after a fossil fuel company here.
Jordan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. We'll be back with more Rising after this.